Hi everyone, this is Laura Hammock from the Marble Jar channel, and today's video is the second of a 4-part series where I share my tools and processes for organizing and accessing digital photos. In the first video, I covered pruning and centralizing Quarterly onto my PC. In this video, I'll talk about how I organize simply. Okay. I know myself well enough to know that whatever organizing system I adopted better be simple, or I would have a hard time sticking with it for the long term. What that means to me is I can't have a bunch of nesting folders with designations that won't make sense in the future. So I'm going to throw my mom under the bus here and give her complicated organizational schema as an example. She came up with what I consider to be somewhat arbitrary top-level groupings: family, friends, grandkids, church, and then under these files, she has folders for events that are sometimes labeled by date, but sometimes just thrown in willy-nilly. Some have subfolders, some don't. So I think you can see the problem here. In order to even keep up with the system, you basically have to examine each picture and then make decisions about which folder to put each individual picture in. Sometimes you might have folders that only contain a couple of photos. Sometimes you might have a picture which belongs in several photos, so then you have a decision to make. Or you might want to duplicate the photo, which then takes up additional space. No, that was not going to work for me. So here's what I do. My organization is based on date. So right within the My Pictures folder on my PC, I have top level folders for each year. And within each of these are 4 subfolders for each quarter of the year. Quarter 1 is January through March, quarter 2 is April through June, and so forth. Occasionally, I will have a big project or a trip or event that warrants its own folder within the year, but this is really limited to 1 or 2 per year, and I make sure to date stamp those, like this one, 2017 Japan trip. So here's what my folders look like. Tidy, right? Okay, so let's go through the pluses and minuses. In the pluses column, or the pros column, it is super easy to organize and it requires no thought. The rules are already in place based on the date that the photo was taken. Plus, since I can sort files on my PC based on date and time, that means that I can bulk move photos by dragging and dropping. I don't need to painstakingly open each photo since I can make decisions entirely by date stamp. I do allow for some events or projects or trips to have their own folders, particularly if it doesn't make any sense to intermingle those photos with my chronological ones. For example, I had a photo that contained all the photos from the massive renovation of our kitchen a couple of years ago, and that was a very specific project, and it also had some photos of other kitchens and ideas, so it made sense to segregate them. But again, only 1 or at most 2 special folders a year. Everything else goes into the quarterly folders. So cons. The main criticism of this system is, how do I find things? Most folks make a bunch of nested folders so that they can find things later. Photos of just their kids together, photos of graduation, photos of beach trips by year. So I like grouping my photos too, but not at the storage level or the physical level. Later on, we can talk about how to group photos using albums or find pictures using good search terms or face or object recognition. In addition, generally speaking, most folks group photos by event. As my kids get older, it's tougher for me to remember, say, what year they started kindergarten or what year we took our trip to Cancun. So I have a cross-reference note in Evernote that contains some of these events and dates. I check the note. It says we went to Cancun in August of 2012. So I can go into the folder 2012 Q3 and find those photos. Another question is, what is the point of quarterly folders? Why don't you just throw them all in one big folder and sort them chronologically? So the answer for me is that the top level years and the quarterly subfolders act as like a table of contents or an index. So rather than have to scroll through years worth of photos to get to something that was like 8 years ago, I can start with the correct year and get there much more quickly. So I can generally find what I want based on my simple chronological organizing system. But remember, this is just how I physically organize and store my photos. I use other tools to help manage, group, and access them. So now we've talked about pruning photos and storing them centrally. That was part 1. And how they are physically organized. That's part 2. Join me in part 3 when I talk about using Picasa to manage and group my photos. I really appreciate any comments you leave below, and thanks for watching.